And now Europe's migrant crisis continues to intensify. Over the weekend, masked mobs threatened asylum seekers on the streets of Stockholm. And now the EU's Criminal Intelligence Agency said that thousands of minors who came to the continent have disappeared. Uri Shapira has more.
Migrants continue to face obstacles and threats in their journey to safer havens, and their situation is perhaps much worse than first thought. A new report by the EU's police agency Europol shows that at least 10,000 unaccompanied child refugees have disappeared after arriving in Europe. Many are believed to have fallen into the hands of organized trafficking syndicates. Europol also documented a disturbing crossover between organized crime groups, which help smuggle refugees into the EU, and human trafficking gangs exploiting them for sex work and slavery. In the meantime, the migrants are facing another threat in Europe, xenophobia.
This is a demonstration that attracts groups and individuals who sympathize with or are active in this, what should I say, radical nationalistic landscape.
A gang of masked black-clad men rioted the streets of Stockholm Friday and distributed leaflets threatening to attack migrant street youth in order, quote, to make a statement. This worrying increase in tension between migrants and the local population comes days after a 22-year-old woman was stabbed to death in a center for unaccompanied asylum seekers minors in southwestern Sweden. The protest also comes a few days after Stockholm announced it is preparing to deport up to 80,000 asylum seekers.
I mean, last year we had roughly over 160,000 people applying for asylum in Sweden, which is the highest number ever, and it's also the highest number per capita in the European Union. It will start for real in the beginning of next year, I think, where there will be an increase in the numbers that we have to deport.
Coupled with the long-lasting threats they face when crossing the Mediterranean Sea, it is no wonder that so many migrants are considering the possibility of returning to the war-torn countries.
Yes, and I'm joined now in studio by Dr. Esther Lapatin, Director of the European Studies Program at the Interdisciplinary Center in Herzliya. Good evening, Dr. Lapatin.
Good evening.
Dr. Lapatin, this is not the first terrible news we've heard from Sweden when concerning the migrants. Just recently, one of the aid workers for refugees was murdered in the country. Is Sweden waking up from a dream of being able to help all the migrants possible to a very, very harsh reality?
Well, it's a great question. I think one of the problems that Europe is facing today, and not just Sweden, is there is a kind of a gap between the leadership and the people, because the people seem to want, more restrictive immigration policy, and that's something that they already said in 2014 at the European election, so that was before the refugee crisis. Well, and it seems like, the public is actually demanding more restrictive, like criteria for asylum and to halt the influx of migrants who are coming to Sweden. So it seems that the government is representing a kind of a view which doesn't seem to coincide with the people. And I think that one of the things that really seems to frustrate and upset the people in Sweden recently was that there was a report that, in fact, that it was the government that authorized the police to hide any information about, sexual harassment or any criminal activity which involved migrants, and not to inform the public that was actually any migrants were involved in the activity. So it seems like the government has a certain view, which is really nice. They have a very liberal view that we have to welcome everyone. And those people really in a very terrible situation, the migrants who are coming to Europe. But I think the problem is that the people are not ready for it. I mean, the feeling is that, we still live in a kind of nation state. We're not willing to, we're afraid that, that anyone who's outside, who's not really part of our culture, who's going to constitute a threat to us. So I think it's, we return into the idea of nation states. And in this sense, I think the whole idea of European Union was not, in a way, yes.
Well, it seems that there would be people capitalizing on that fear. Just recently, we had someone from the Sweden Democrats speaking with us. Of course, this is an anti-immigrant party, and their numbers are rising in Sweden. Yes. The same is true in Germany.
We have to see, if you analyze the election to the European Parliament in 2014, it's very clear that Denmark, for example, received the Danish Volkspartei, which is a kind of like a very extreme right party, they actually came in first. In Austria, they came in third. In France, first. Also, like in Britain, like everywhere we've seen like a similar phenomena, that actually far-right parties are gaining power. Extreme xenophobic and racist parties are really gaining power in Europe. And I think that in a way, Sweden's probably going to have experienced the same wave. I don't think the Swedish people are different than the Germans or the French or the British. You know, they all have similar phobias and similar, concerns.
Well, let's speak about German concerns.
Yeah.
We have Polina Gorayev, I24 News Berlin correspondent, joining us now. Polina, good evening. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Good evening.
Polina, of course, one of the biggest stories out of Germany today is AfD leader Frauke Petry told a newspaper that border guards should, if necessary, shoot at migrants trying to enter illegally. How unlikely is this statement from a politician, and what are authorities doing about it, if anything?
Well, considering past similar statements from the leaders, this statement is not surprising, but it's, of course, also unlikely to lead to substantial consequences, both for Mrs. Petry or for any other leader who chooses to speak this way. This is how the AfD party has managed to become the third largest party currently, at least according to recent polls. This is part of their tactic. They're exploiting the fears of those people who fear the idea that thousands are entering their country every day. And they want the government to do whatever it is necessary to stop it, even if we're talking about such unlikely measures as giving soldiers or policemen the permission to fire at will. This is simply unlikely.
Yes, Polina Gorayev joining us from Berlin. Thank you very much. Dr. Lapatin, it seems that this would also have an influence on the incumbent Chancellor, Angela Merkel,
Yes.
who today made a statement that most migrants will have to return home after the war. This was quite unpredictable. Is she trying to align herself with the moving notion within the public?
Oh, absolutely. I think that if Merkel is not going to do that, probably she's going to, the next general election in Germany is going to take place in September 2017. But I think if Merkel is not going to change her tone, I'm afraid that the German public will make her actually resign earlier than 2017, or something terrible could have happened to her, like, unfortunately. But my feeling is, when I read the German newspapers, is that, the German public is very upset. Even people who voted for her, in a way, they felt that she betrayed, like a public, and she wasn't really represented the German, interests. And I think, in a way, like, she went maybe too far, because she wasn't really, like, seeking to share the burden, because, Germany got 1 million refugees. If you look at other countries like France and Britain, they hardly got any. So I think there's a feeling of its unfairness, in a way that, how come we got so many refugees? And, it's actually our, Angela Merkel, some people even said, I wish, Cameron was actually the Chancellor of Germany, because he would probably take care of the German interests more, better than Merkel. So unfortunately, that's, how many Germans feel nowadays.
From Time Magazine's Person of the Year to maybe a politician in decline.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Esther Lapatin, always shedding light for us on international affairs. Thank you very much.